13 U.S. bases, over 50,000 American troops, and Iran just turned them into rubble. And Washington didn't tell you. That's not a theory. That's what military officials told the New York Times. Satellite photos published by the BBC confirmed it. Black craters where aircraft hangars once stood. Radar systems worth $300 million smashed into the desert floor. Commanders relocated to hotels, actual civilian hotels, because their bases were no longer safe to sleep in. The Pentagon called it manageable damage. The photos called it something else entirely. Right now, in April 2026, the United States is engaged in a shooting war with Iran. And the story you haven't been told, the story buried under press briefings and grainy strike footage, is that America's forward bases in the Gulf are bleeding. They were hit harder than any official has admitted. And the weapon Iran used to do it wasn't some secret hypersonic marvel. It was a cheap strategy, executed with brutal patience, targeting the one thing the entire U.S. defensive network in the Middle East depends on. That weak point has a name, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why it changes everything. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is the kind of deep dive you will not find anywhere else. Let's go back to the beginning. When the United States struck Iran's nuclear facilities in June 2025 in what CENTCOM called Operation Midnight Hammer, the plan was clean, precise, overwhelming. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, invisible to radar, dropped GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, bunker-busting bombs weighing 30,000 pounds each, onto the deeply buried facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. The USS Georgia, a guided missile submarine lurking beneath the Arabian Sea, fired over 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Isfahan alone. The operation lasted 12 days. Iran's nuclear program, decades in the making, was shattered. Washington declared victory. Tehran declared war. Not immediately, not openly. Iran's response in June 2025 was choreographed, almost theatrical. Iran fired missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, but the timing was pre-coordinated with Qatari officials. Exact coordinates were reportedly communicated in advance. The missiles that got through landed in remote corners of the base. No American lives lost. The message from Iran: we can reach you, but we're choosing not to, yet. America's missile defense systems knocked down the rest. THAAD batteries roared to life across the Gulf. Patriot systems intercepted incoming warheads. Aegis-equipped destroyers in the Arabian Sea engaged threats from over the horizon. The interception rate hit 90%. Officials celebrated. But here's what they didn't tell you. To which in 12 days, 1/4, gone. What's your weapon of choice when defending against a missile swarm? Type A for THAAD, Type B for Patriot. Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. The THAAD system is not like a rifle. You can't just order more bullets. Each interceptor takes months to manufacture, integrate, and test. Then more months to ship and deploy. The Missile Defense Agency told Congress it expected to buy just 11 THAAD missiles in 2023. Another 12 in 2024. That's 23 missiles per year, against an arsenal that burns through 150 in less than 2 weeks of fighting. Do the math, it doesn't work. And Tehran did the math, long before anyone in Washington admitted the problem existed. This is the secret weak point. Not a gap in radar coverage, not a software flaw, not a shortage of aircraft. It's arithmetic. Iran realized something devastating. It doesn't need to shoot down American jets or sink American warships to win. It just needs to keep firing, keep forcing the United States to spend $12.7 million interceptors to stop missiles that cost Iran a fraction of that. Keep doing it until the shield runs dry. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said it himself openly to the press in March 2026. He admitted that Iran can produce offensive weapons faster than the United States, and its allies can manufacture interceptors to stop them. Read that again. The U.S. Secretary of State confirmed that America is losing the production war, the industrial war against Iran. Don't miss what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon so you never miss an analysis like this one. Now the 2026 war began. February 28th. The United States and Israel launched a new round of strikes on Iran. What followed was different from June 2025. Completely different. Iran did not choreograph its response this time. Iran did not call ahead. Within days, satellite imagery showed what was happening to U.S. bases across the Gulf. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, CENTCOM's forward headquarters, home to 10,000 personnel, the nerve center of American air power in the Middle East, took a direct ballistic missile hit. A radome was destroyed. A radome is a dome-shaped radar housing that protects critical antenna systems. It costs tens of millions of dollars to build and months to replace. Al Sadr Air Base and Al Ruwais Air Base in the United Arab Emirates both showed massive black craters in satellite images published by the BBC. Buildings gone. Structures collapsed. What had been operational military facilities looked like construction demolition zones. The U.S. Naval Base in Bahrain, America's Fifth Fleet headquarters, the hub of all U.S. naval operations in the Persian Gulf, showed visible damage. All U.S. ships had left port. The fleet headquarters was reduced to fewer than 100 mission-critical personnel by late February. Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. Both showed damage in satellite imagery analyzed by the BBC and the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In the first 2 weeks of the 2026 war, Iran caused an estimated $800 million in damage to U.S. military infrastructure across the Gulf. Military officials told the New York Times that many of America's 13 bases near Iran had been rendered, quote, all but uninhabitable. Personnel were relocated to offices, to hotels, civilian hotels in Doha, Manama, Riyadh. American service members were now sleeping in business-class hotel rooms because their barracks had craters in them. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi posted about it publicly on social media, calling American troops human shields for Gulf civilian populations. And now we come to the piece that makes everything else worse. In the early days of the 2026 war, Iran fired a missile at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. Not at the aircraft, not at the runway, at one specific target, the AN/TPY-2 radar, the THAAD radar, the eyes of the entire missile defense system. The $300 million radar was struck. Bloomberg reported it, citing a U.S. official. Satellite imagery confirmed it. Ryan Brobst, Deputy Director of the Center on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, told Bloomberg that if confirmed, it would be one of Iran's most successful attacks so far. The loss created a significant gap in high-altitude surveillance coverage over Jordan and the northern Gulf approaches. It was not a random target. Iran had studied the architecture. Iran had mapped every radar node, every communications hub, every sensor that feeds targeting data into the THAAD launchers and the Patriot batteries and the Aegis destroyers. Iran knew that the defensive network is not the interceptors themselves. The interceptors are just the fist. The network is the nervous system, the radars, the communications links, the satellite terminals in Bahrain. Destroy the eyes and the fist swings blind. At the same time, Iranian Shahed drones, $50,000 to $70,000 each, commercially manufactured, low-flying, radar-evading, began swarming U.S. positions. Over 3,000 drone launches at Gulf states by late March 2026. The Shahed flies low, below the detection threshold of systems designed to catch high-altitude ballistic missiles. The radar that costs $1.1 billion sees a hypersonic warhead at 200 miles. It does not see a Shahed drone skimming the sand dunes at 50 meters altitude. The drones hit SATCOM terminals in Bahrain, communications links, the cables that connect the sensors to the shooters. Iran was not trying to kill Americans in those early strikes. Iran was trying to blind them. JINSA, the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, published a report in March 2026 titled The Eroding Shield. It confirmed what the satellite imagery showed. Iran's strategy had evolved. It was methodical. It was working. The radar and communications networks that feed tracking data to Patriot, THAAD, and guided missile destroyers are essential for determining the timing and trajectory of incoming threats. Their destruction forces defenders to expend more resources, more missiles to achieve the same interception results. More missiles fired per threat, against a stockpile already down 25% from June 2025. Against a production line making 11 to 25 new THAAD interceptors per year. What would you have done as CENTCOM commander when Iran started targeting the radars instead of the planes? Drop your tactical response in the comments. We want to hear your thinking. Here's where the math becomes truly alarming, and this is the part the Pentagon does not want discussed on primetime television. During the June 2025 war, U.S. forces also fired approximately 80 Standard Missile 3 interceptors, SM-3s, from Aegis destroyers in the Arabian Sea. The SM-3IB variant costs roughly $9 million per missile at normal production rates, but that price has been climbing. By the FY 2024 supplemental procurement, some SM-3IB missiles were costing nearly $24 million each. The Pentagon, as of late 2025, was debating ending SM-3IB production entirely in favor of the IIA variant, a different missile with different characteristics, designed more for the Indo-Pacific theater than the Gulf. In the process of optimizing for one theater, the U.S. was hollowing out its capacity for another. The Munitions Acceleration Council, a Pentagon body established in late 2025 explicitly to address munitions shortfalls, has begun pushing increased production. But increasing production of a system like THAAD is not a switch you flip. It requires specialized manufacturing facilities, rare materials, complex assembly chains. The lead time from funding approval to delivered interceptor is measured in years, not months. Years. Meanwhile, the Defense Department reprogrammed $700 million in funds in May and June of 2025 to buy additional THAAD interceptors. At $15 million per missile in FY 2026 terms, that buys approximately 45 additional missiles. 45. Against a burn rate of over 150 in 12 days of fighting. Pentagon officials reportedly warned President Trump directly. An extended campaign in Iran carries catastrophic risks to interceptor inventories. If the war runs beyond 10 days of full-scale exchange, some critical stockpiles could start running out. Trump said the initial projection for the campaign was 4 to 5 weeks. Support the channel by giving this video a thumbs up if you're finding this breakdown valuable. This kind of research takes dozens of hours, and your engagement makes it possible. So how does America respond to this? What's the actual plan? The U.S. has begun moving THAAD assets out of South Korea into the Middle East, stripping the Korean Peninsula's missile defense to reinforce the Gulf. On March 10, 2026, the Army began physically relocating THAAD interceptors from South Korean storage to the theater. The strategic logic is clear. The immediate threat is Iran. The strategic risk is obvious. If North Korea reads the movement and decides the moment has arrived, the Korean Peninsula just got significantly more vulnerable. The U.S. also surged additional F-15E Strike Eagles, 47 aircraft total, to Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan in January 2026. The F-15E is a dual-role fighter. In April 2024, F-15Es shot down over 80 Iranian drones in a single engagement during Iran's attack on Israel. They are effective, they are proven, but they need radar to operate, and Iran just destroyed the radar at that same base in Jordan. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, transiting from the South China Sea, ended a 20-day carrier gap in the region. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, repositioned from the Caribbean, briefly transmitting its location off Morocco as it transited toward the Strait of Gibraltar. 2 carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea, 14 aerial refueling tankers staged at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. The combined firepower, roughly 150 aircraft, 20 warships, over 15,000 sailors and Marines, is staggering. But here's the contradiction at the heart of U.S. strategy in 2026. The United States has positioned extraordinary offensive power to threaten Iran. Simultaneously, the infrastructure that protects American troops, the bases, the radars, the interceptor stockpiles, is under sustained, systematic assault. Iran is not trying to win a conventional battle. Iran is trying to make U.S. bases untenable, to force the choice: stay and bleed or withdraw. Iran has launched over 1,000 ballistic missiles at Gulf states since February 28th. It has launched over 3,000 drones. The interception rate remains high, around 90%, but that 10% that gets through is hitting fuel depots, radar domes, communications nodes, hangars. It is not killing thousands of Americans. It is killing America's ability to fight. The Iranian drone that does the most damage in 2026 costs $60,000. The interceptor that destroys it costs $3 million or more. That ratio, 1 to 50, is the arithmetic of attrition. Iran can sustain it. Can America? There is one more piece to this. The political piece. The piece that may ultimately matter more than any missile. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Oman all lobbied Washington before the February 2026 strikes to stand down. They did not want their territory used as a launch pad for attacks on Iran. The Gulf monarchies know something that Washington sometimes forgets. They live next door to Iran. They will still be there after the bombers fly home. Fox News and the Wall Street Journal both reported that Gulf states blocked American use of their bases and airspace for certain strike missions over fears of retaliation. Qatar has stated its opposition to U.S. offensive strikes being launched from Al Udeid. The practical enforcement of that position during full-scale war remains unclear, but the political tension is real. The United States is fighting a war from bases whose host nations are quietly hoping it ends quickly. And then there is the question of the human shield. Iranian officials have publicly accused the United States of relocating troops to civilian hotels, using GCC civilians as cover. Whether that framing is propaganda or legitimate concern, it is being made at the United Nations, broadcast across the Arab world, and absorbed by populations in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and the UAE, who are watching their cities absorb the spillover of a war they didn't start. This is the secret weak point. It is not hidden in some classified annex. It is visible in the satellite photos. It is audible in the Secretary of State's own words. It is legible in the budget spreadsheets from the Missile Defense Agency. The United States built its Gulf presence on the assumption that its defensive shield would hold indefinitely. That assumption required adversaries to keep spending more per missile than America spent per interceptor. Iran has inverted that math. Shahed drones at $60,000 force THAAD responses at $12.7 million. Ballistic missiles by the 100 Force Interceptor launches that consume 25% of an irreplaceable stockpile in under 2 weeks. Precision strikes on radar systems create gaps that force every other system to work harder, fire more, burn faster. The shield is not broken, but it is bending. And the question that no Pentagon briefing has answered, the question that every Allied capital is quietly asking, is how long it holds before it breaks. Was the decision to escalate into full-scale war in February 2026 a strategic masterstroke, or a trap Iran had been preparing for years? Leave your assessment in the comments. We read every single one, and the best answers get featured in our next breakdown. America's military power in 2026 remains the most formidable on Earth. That is not in question. What is in question is whether power projected from bleeding bases, with interceptor stockpiles running low, against an adversary playing a patient arithmetic game, whether that power can achieve its objectives before the math runs out. Freedom is not free. It never has been. And the men and women stationed at Al Udeid, at Prince Sultan, at Ali Al Salem, rotating between their damaged barracks and civilian hotel rooms, watching radar systems worth hundreds of millions burn in the desert. They understand that cost better than anyone watching from home. But understanding the cost means demanding that the leaders who send them there have a plan. Not just a plan to strike, a plan to sustain, a plan to win. History will judge whether they had one. If you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel exists for. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, share this with someone who needs to understand what's really happening in the Gulf, and drop your comments below. What do you think the United States needs to do right now to change the strategic calculus? We'll see you in the next one.